Well, the question about whether there is an attack that is technically well executed. Well, in the world of cyber-activism, some pretty cool things are being done. I was talking about Osiris, which is a CMS that publishes everything through P2P and signs it with GTP, and it can be traced, it can be shut down. And as for attacks, maybe not cyber-activism attacks, but I guess we'll talk about SUTNet later on, which was a real example of how to create a tool to shut systems down with lots of technology. Well, there are attacks that are cool. That there are very well elaborated attacks in ZNH where we have all the defacements published. We can very quickly see how we discover a new way of attacking a system and how all the servers are going down one after the other. And people are really working on it. Of course, you have the RFI that enters one template in an HTTP that is ill-configured or that is ill-patched. But we also have other attacks that are very well elaborated. Well, I just wanted to say with regards to what they have asked, that with regards to the technical part, we have other tools such as Tor that have been implanted in countries where the use of internet could be something you would be risking your life for. So Tor is something that has been created by hackers or cyber activists. So I think it's not just about attack, but also about defense. There are tools, cryptographical tools with secure codes that help people in countries where they don't have the right to communicate freely to do so. In Egypt, we have shown that there is a red button, we could say not a physical red button, but there is something virtually that does the same thing, that disconnects the internet, is something that we should think on. Can that exist in a civilized country? Because that is very bad for a democratic country. The fact that they can have a button in order to connect everything, talk to all the ISPs and disconnect internet, that should not be feasible. There should be some control for that not to happen. I have two questions left. I'm sorry. One has to do with what Robert has said. He said that essentially WikiLeaks is not so different from the New York Times. Who would like to answer to that comment? I think that's a vision that has America versus Europe. That's the vision. I'm not going to be talking in absolute terms, but in America, the media have been much more limited by the mix between their financial sources and their content. In the States, usually the separation between ads and information is religious. Journalists have no control whatsoever over it. But in Europe, we have all seen, and well, we see it in Spain, we have multiple examples of that, how companies who have lots of ads in newspaper will never be criticized, or they condition the institutional information. I know that many of my friends in the media are going to be very upset about what I just said, but I think it's something that happens here, and we have seen that things have changed when the government will tell them that the ads are going to be sent to some other media, the criticisms disappear. So you need to think that if you are going to go to the media with something scandalous, you're going to be protected and it's going to be published, and that does not happen in Spain. Robert, you wanted to say something, or?
WikiLeaks is like the New York Times. No, I would say it's not, because, journalists could be subpoenaed to give up their sources, or they face jail. So the WikiLeaks is an important middleman or service that will stand between the sources and the journalist, and they can vet the source and vet the information. But they don't have, because they're decentralized and online, there's it's hard to serve a subpoena.
Well, yeah, it's a sort of a hack, though. I mean, it's a technical hack that gets them out of any geographical jurisdiction, but still, they're a publisher, and I don't really know that they vet their stuff that much. I mean, maybe they do now, but.
It seems that many people in Egypt have been capable of communicating by using archaic methods. Could you tell us if the government said that they are shutting the internet off, what would you do? What would you do? Please note this down. Oh, okay. If we had to shut it down, or no, do you want us to shut it down or to defend it? Well, to defend it or to be able to access the internet some other way. Well, we'd do the same thing. We would call France. We would phone some number in France and then connect. Well, that's what they did in Egypt. There are different ways, satellite connections. Last year, a Spanish researcher, Christian and Leo, were giving conferences on how to connect with a Linux OS through satellite and how to change the system of connections, satellite connections. I don't know to what extent the government can shut the satellites off, but they could, I guess. Well, in Egypt, well, I'm always criticizing, I know, cyber-activism, but I'm not. I think that they have their positive side. You can, just like cell phone communication or any other channel, thanks to Twitter and other communications, people in Egypt who could not connect to the internet, they were given modem numbers, just like we had, and they connected that way. International modems, and people even, when they started shutting it down, they opened their Wi-Fi routers so that they could connect without any problem whatsoever. So technically, I don't know how we could face a shutdown, a massive shutdown of the internet, because we would be completely unprotected, wouldn't we? But I think that technically, from a technical point of view, there will always be methods in order to avoid censorship. I'm a bit more scared by multinationals, by multinational corporations, because they are the ones who really connect. For instance, Apple with their iPads, or the cloud, or Google, they could be the ones to shut the internet off. Maybe the government would come and say, I'm going to shut it down. And they'd say, we did it before you. So, yeah, well, I don't know. I'm going to vote for a multinational corporation, yeah. Robert?
Just to clarify one thing on the WikiLeaks side of things, I mean, I think that they, you're right, Eleanor. They do. The New York Times and WikiLeaks work well, could work well in partnership if they actually got along. But just to clarify that, I think that there's clearly the editorial role that's done. It was amazing to read how the documents out of WikiLeaks were analyzed. What a sort of a war room that was set up, and what a colossal amount of effort it took to actually do a proper job of vetting them. And that is the kind of thing that a newspaper can do that a small activist organization can't do. But it also, I just think it will be interesting to see to what extent newspapers are able to reclaim the role of that something like WikiLeaks has seized.
But they've given up investigative journalism. They're not paying for it. They keep laying off staff and closing papers, and I think the corporations in America have them scared, quite frankly.
You're a cynic.
Yeah.
One other thing, also, just that we haven't talked about this. Which I think is really remarkable, is when you watch those protesters in Egypt, like so many of them have mobile phones in their hands, and we haven't talked about the effect of just the ability that everyday people have to document what is going on in front of them nowadays. And that might be the most remarkable thing that's happening right now, when you can document and then upload to YouTube proof of what you're seeing. It's just incredibly powerful. And we haven't talked about it, but that's probably probably the most
YouTube as a cyber weapon.
Do you not think that would be the response from a state and a government which has very limited control of the internet in the first place? Shouldn't we be concerned in the Western world about what China, for example, could do? Yes, we take all communications, we identify the activists, and we neutralize them. I'm talking about China. And I am in much better control of whatever is happening inside my borders. Wouldn't that be a risk an even greater risk for freedom than just blocking the internet? Well, I fully agree with you. I've been upset enough to visit China twice, and it is one of our greatest concerns. The control systems are much more elaborate, apart from the internet firewall. One of the great problems that we face with governments like the Chinese government is the use of certification institutions, intermediate certification institutions. They have their own agencies and institutions. So you are connecting using HTTPS with that beautiful lock at the bottom of the browser. And it is an agency controlled by the Chinese government that is granting you access. So they're intercepting all of your communication at all times. They know much more about you than you about them, of course. This is quite obvious in China. When you connect to the internet, accessing Gmail or certain websites, it's certified by whatever. Oh, I thought this was VeriSign, but it's not VeriSign in China because there is an intermediate agency or institution in the middle. So they're interfering with everything. It's like cutting the wire altogether. You try to place a call and they cut you off. Well, the blockage, the internet blockage in Egypt. This was an attempt at blocking information coming from inside Egypt and telling the world about what was happening in the country. 88% of the local population has no internet access. So the revolts would not be crushed just by blocking the internet. It was a question of blocking information from inside the country going outwards. So it was an attempt at preventing other countries from positioning themselves on the riots. As soon as foreign countries positioned themselves, things would get much more complicated for Mubarak and his government. So why wasn't the international community positioning right from the start? Because it was unclear who was in charge of the different protests. It was not a simple history of goodies and baddies. It's like the US trying to find out who is doing what. If you don't know who is leading what sort of protest, if you're just getting images of riots and people looting in the Egyptian museum, it seems that people have nothing better to do. They're just common criminals doing nothing interesting. You're talking about China, but this is the same story everywhere. We could talk about any country in the world. Problems like these happen everywhere. I recall something in the US, a company that sold little gadgets with which you could capture information from an SSL encrypted communication. Who were the customers for that company? Well, basically the US government. This is something which is a common denominator for all countries on Earth. Doesn't matter whether they're dictatorships or democratic governments. As soon as the powerful want to find out about you, they will find the gadgets and the technology. This is a general concern everywhere. Well, you've seen, I've been summoned to give a green light to the break. So 15 minutes, okay?